In the beginning, we all start out as donkeys and fish, and as we learn, eventually evolve into stronger poker players. In this video, we are not going to focus on any one specific strategy, as optimal tactics and strategy can vary from game to game. My goal instead is to change your entire perspective on what poker really is and help mold your thought processes into that of a winning player. If you learn to think the correct way and truly understand the underlying cause and effect of what drives poker profit, specific poker strategy will not only come more naturally to you, developing a plan for every hand you will play becomes infinitely easier. So, if you are tired of getting lost during a poker hand, wondering what went wrong and how you are either losing money or not winning as much as you think you should, then sit tight and let's dig into how to convert theory into actual winning poker strategy. Before you learn to actually play poker, there are three key concepts that everyone must understand. In fact, you can study strategy until you are blue in the face, but if you fail to understand any one of these three concepts, your potential will be severely limited. The first one, and the most important, is something very few poker players will ever really grasp. In fact, it boggles my mind how big of an enigma it seems to be for the vast majority of anyone who wants to learn how to play poker. And that is where the money actually comes from in poker. After all the hands are played and all is said and done, once the long term is reached, how the heck does anyone show a profit? Well, truth is, very few people actually do. Due to rake and a number of other factors, very few people actually win money at poker over a significant sample size of hands. Estimates range from as low as 3%, but in reality the number is likely more like 8 to 10%. So yes, at least 90% of people who ever play poker for real money will end up being losers over the long term. But you don't have to become a statistic. There are things you can learn that most people are not talking about that will give you an edge over everyone else who refuses to acknowledge or learn that information or just doesn't have access to it. And that is what this video is all about. So let's talk about where the money comes from in poker. First of all, let me get something out of the way. You do not profit in poker from making big hands and then getting paid off. Everyone wins money in these spots. I'm not saying that maximizing your profit when you have a big hand is not important. It is. We just need to maximize profit in all areas of our game. What I'm actually saying is that winning money and making money are two different things. Just because you got aces all in preflop versus kings in a specific hand does not mean that you won anything. In fact, since everyone would gladly get kings all in preflop, you actually made $0. Let's say roles had been reversed and you had been the guy with the kings. You would have lost your entire stack, and he would have been the one that thought he won money. So since you each have equal chance of picking up kings and aces versus each other, over the long term, nobody makes any money in that spot. Does that make sense? Every player will pick up the same number of kings, the same number of aces, queens, ace kings, hit the same number of sets, two pairs, trips, you name it. And these hands are very easy to play. Most players play these hands really well. In fact, it's really hard to misplay those hands. Therefore, there's very little room for actual profit when you have a strong hand. Let me repeat, there is very little room to actually make profit in poker when you have a strong hand. Let me put it another way. If every player plays exactly 1 million hands in their career and makes $500 with each of their big pairs, or flop sets, etc., then over the long term, nobody is actually making anything, since in order to make that $500, you have to pull $500 back from the player pool. Somebody else picks up a big hand in equal amounts to you, they pull back your $500 from the player pool. So money's just moving around all over the place, and it's never settling in on one player. And that's what concept number one in this video is all about. So don't fall victim to something almost all people are guilty of, and that is putting way too much emphasis on big hands. If most players get their pair all in versus over cards and their hand holds up, they pat themselves on the back because they just won a big pot and think they've made money. Once again, I have news for them, they didn't. When you view this from a long-term perspective, they made $0. You simply do not make money by getting all in preflop with kings, ace king, whatever, or some other variant of this situation. The spot will theoretically occur with the same frequency for everybody, yielding a net sum profit of 0 over the long term. Everyone negates everyone else's profit in these spots. In other words, if everyone plays exactly the same, and they pick up the same exact hands and face the same exact situations, nobody wins except the house. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, so I guess if you don't understand it now, re-listen to what you just listened to and make sure you understand this before you moved on. I am putting a link in that will take you to an article by Tommy Angelo. He's the one that defined this concept, and he calls it reciprocality. That's reciprocality. Read his article, absorb it, and make sure you understand it before moving on. Take a minute if you need to pause the video and read it over. Now that you're completely clear on the concept of reciprocality, let's move on. The overriding concept here is that you do not need to play particularly well to win. You just need your opponents to play worse than you do. At the end of the day, where you really make money is by having your opponents play any of the multitude of decisions less well than you do. In other words, all you have to do is play poker with bad players, and the money will come, even if you are just a mediocre player yourself. However, as games get tougher and tougher, finding these super soft games is becoming increasingly difficult. It's true that in the not too distant past, a professional player could simply play a very tight range of hands and wait for bad players to basically hand their money over, either bit by bit or even in large chunks. Making little mistakes here and there and having a general lack of post-flop skill didn't really matter. As long as you followed the adage, tight is right, you were good to go. Furthermore, since a lot of players were making money doing this, there was no negative reinforcement to provide the negative impetus for them to try and improve their games. So life was good. Today, even at the micros, everyday players have access to hand charts and a plethora of information in books, television, and online at their disposal. Anyone can learn a basic poker strategy in a few days and beat a table of fishy players. Even at stakes as low as 10 and L, maybe even lower, you will find a multitude of micro-stakes grinders out there playing decent fundamental preflop poker. However, knitting it up simply will not do if you ever have a desire to play above 25 and L. In order to beat the modern game, you need to maximize profit in every situation you face. This is why big all-in pots, while dramatic and exciting, are only a small piece of where the money comes from in poker. The other 99% of the time, we are not getting all in. We are raising, calling, or folding in small pots that are often meaningless for the vast majority of players out there. They play for the action and excitement of big pots and simply have no clue of where their profit is coming from or where their losses are going to. This fact offers a great opportunity to anyone with the knowledge and will to take advantage of it. I have said many times and been ridiculed for it, and that is that cards don't matter in poker. What I mean by this is that the cards you are dealt do not make a difference in your long-term win rate, since, as we know, everyone will pick up the same hands with the same frequencies over the long term. What really matters is that you maximize and play each spot the best to your ability, no matter how unexciting it is, and not spend too much time focusing on the big pots or any number of the tough spots you might encounter. Go check out some of the poker forums out there. You will most likely see players either posting the big pot hands or hands where they face so-called difficult decisions. Most of the time, the hands that they are discussing are spots where the decision is very close in EV between two separate decisions. In other words, it often doesn't matter what they choose to do. The long-term win rate would virtually be the same either way. Therefore, in those so-called quote-unquote tough spots, you can usually just flip a coin in making your decision rather than sitting around racking your brain about it for hours and hours at a time. Furthermore, many of those difficult decisions might have been caused by mistakes earlier in the hand, or been a complete game flow foobar. So where does the money come from in poker? It comes from winning more battles, both big and small, than your opponents win at the table. Every single decision you make is a battle being fought, and if one player does it better than the other, money changes hands. Over the long term, the players who maximize the best and the most overall battles will be the ones who profit. And playing by looking at expected value instead of for the thrill of making big hands is what you should be striving for. Once you can do this, you are beginning to think like a professional. Now that you know how the money is made in poker, you may be wondering how to convert that theory into real money. The quickest path to profit is through sound fundamentals and strategic planning, which manifests in the form of superior tactics in every single action you make. It comes from beating your opponents in ways they don't even know exists. It is about being mindful of why you are doing what you are doing at all times. It is about winning the wars no one else is attempting to fight. But mostly, it's about mercilessly forcing your will on your opponents while avoiding reciprocation. And it just so happens that this style of active and exploitative play is most often associated with a loose aggressive style of play that focuses on small ball poker with lots of bets and raises with very few passive plays. That leads me to our next topic, because loose aggressive play involves adjusting what you are doing based on the specific table dynamic that you are currently in. The second overriding poker concept that you need to understand is that poker is a game about people. The table dynamic, or the players who make up your table, along with how they view you and each other at the table, are the number one influencer on how you should plan your hands from preflop through to the river. And establishing a set of optimal vacuum lines to use against a variety of player types is the single best thing you can do to improve the quality of your play today. In fact, game flow adjustments are what separate the men from the boys, and is the biggest reason some players get stuck at a certain stake and can never move up to the bigger games. The second part of this is also in recognizing when you should not even be sitting at a table. Often, players will continue on in a game with no hope of winning over the long term. In fact, table selection is the most important skill any poker player will possess. Remember what we just talked about in concept number 1 and where poker profit comes from? In a nutshell, it comes from the collective mistakes of your opponents. Therefore, the biggest winners in poker are not necessarily the best players. They are often just the best at playing against the worst players the most often. The third important concept that all players need to know is about the mental side of poker. More specifically, it's about avoiding tilt. If you've made it this far into this video, you probably already know what tilt is, but just to make sure we are clear, let's define it. Tilt is when we alter our play based on short-term results, rather than reads and game flow. In other words, you play worse when either winning or losing. I'm not some kind of mental guru, but I do know that tilt is the thing that holds a lot of talented players back from achieving their full potential. I won't try and tell you specifically how to fix your tilt, and yes, everyone does tilt. You are lying to yourself if you say that you don't. What I will do is tell you how I deal with tilt and how changing your overall perspective can really help. In fact, embracing concept number 1 in this video is a strong positive step toward helping someone cure their tilt problems. But just in case, here are a few specific keys that might help you with tilt. Number 1, remain positive and upbeat. I mean genuinely during your sessions, try to remain positive no matter what happens. Number 2, try to live in the moment. Make sure you take deep breaths. Make sure you're focusing on what hand you're playing right now, not what happened 5 hands ago. Not about that bad beat. Not about worrying about being up for the session. Actually sit there and try to live in the moment right now. Number 3, try to have detachment from results and your bankroll. The best way I know to solve people that have this type of problem is make sure that you're not looking at the cashier, not looking at your hold'em manager or poker tracker during your sessions. I make a point of not looking at how I am doing during sessions. I always wait to the end of the session to check the cashier. I've even had times in the past where I've waited a full week to look at the cashier. Number 4, acceptance of chaos. Shit happens. Bad things are going to happen during your session. Good things are also going to happen. Many things that can affect your emotions will happen. But if you accept that these things are going to happen in advance and get used to the idea of these things happening, then it's not going to be so bad. It's almost as if you're expecting bad things to happen or really good things to happen, and you're just never going to let yourself be surprised of it. Just accept the chaos, which poker is, and you will be a much happier person and a much better poker player. Number 5, try to have efficiency during your hands. This kind of ties into number 2. Only try to think about the way to play every street and future street should particular cards come. Go ahead and make a contingency in your mind to allow for all the future streets. Do not waste mental energy on anything that is not relevant to playing this hand well. In other words, if you have a strong hand and it's a two-tone board, don't sit there and think in your head, no heart, because you should not be thinking about or worrying about only one contingency in a hand, because you know the percentage that a heart's going to come. You know the percentage that's not going to come. You need to form a plan for the hand no matter what card comes and already know what you're going to do before the card even comes on the turn or river. Having a plan for every hand from beginning to finish, no matter what contingency happens, is kind of the whole idea here, right? In summary, we have covered 3 things that players can work on today to improve their results immediately. The concepts are actually much more important than any specific strategy one can learn, but are also the least practiced elements for most players. This creates a great opportunity for you. If you master these concepts, you will have a significant edge on anyone who does not, and will almost certainly enjoy a better win rate as a result. I'm going to end this video by giving you 3 specific things that you can do today to take action and become a better player. Number 1, focus on the fundamentals and put yourself in good situations. Actively work on improving your play in the so-called marginal spots that everyone else thinks is boring. Seek out profit where no one else is looking. Number 2, avoid playing in games where there isn't at least one really bad player in the 2 seats to your right, or at least 2 bad players on the table. The more bad players you have on a table, the better. Number 3, don't change your play based on recent results. Try to think of every hand as just being one in a billion spots just like this that you will play over the long term. Keep perspective and you have a great chance of conquering or at least avoiding your tilt. If you want to learn more about poker, please visit my website automaticpoker.com, where you can find information about my book, check out my blog, and much, much more. Thanks for watching.